Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. You know, after a long time and various controversies and a lot of waiting, we are finally at Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Although it's been a very messy and uneven phase 4 or 5, wherever we are, I think this is phase 5, in the MCU, I actually really like this movie. I was kind of surprised how into it I was. You know, I was like, maybe I'm over the Guardians. And I think this generally worked. It wasn't the tightest screenplay. It feels like they got to things out of more convenience because they had to. It didn't feel like organic the way certain characters, particularly Gamora, comes up. Adam Warlock, I don't fully understand like how that works, and I'm actually a fan of his from growing up. It's Shaggy, and I think No Way Home was Shaggy. I think Wakanda Forever was also Shaggy, which are probably two of my favorites of this post-Endgame list of Marvel movies. It kind of reminds me of what I like about the Guardians of the Galaxy. The themes I liked about the original, that it's not really, you know, the Guardians aren't like the Avengers or something. I mean, you know, they're a team of misfits and all that, but it's like they, through saving the world, show that, you know, you might think they're shitty people or Ravengers or pirates or something like that, but they show at their core that they are actually kind of good people through both their found family and their actions. It did actually sort of remind me of themes of the original Guardians of the Galaxy, where it was, you know, despite them being Ravengers and pillagers and pirates and stuff, they are, and feeling that they're maybe not necessarily the best people, that they, through their actions of kind of saving that world, that they are redeemed and actually the good people that they always sort of wanted to be. And I think one of the things about this film is kind of the depression that, you know, Quill is in and various of them are in, and feeling, you know, or where they are in life and feeling that they can still, you know, do something good, and the good that they get from it. As much as this is like, they're kind of the rougher and tougher group, they have great charisma together as actors and as characters. Those characters also have a very strong kind of moral center, particularly about like life and when there's a point and when there's a line, and I think this shows that as well. It sort of also reminds me of something like Return of the Jedi, because you have these characters sort of coming to what was similar in a lot of ways, how this is similar to the first one, how they're kind of coming to the events of the first one with the added context of where they are. And this one has free creatures just like that one, although I guess this worse things happen to them in this one. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is about Rocket Raccoon has been mortally injured, and the Guardians have to figure out how to save him because he's been made in his proprietary technology. They can't save him because there's a kill switch involved. So they go to the High Evolutionary to kind of help them save their friend Rocket Raccoon, bring him back and save him from death, while also seeing all the evils the High Evolutionary has done, as Peter Quill also is getting over Gamora, the Gamora he knew died in Infinity War, as well as dealing with a Gamora who doesn't remember him at all, really, unfortunately. So he's sort of dealing with that as she joins the team. Of course, they go on kind of these crazy space adventures to save their friend and make sure they're a team once again and fight the High Evolutionary and his crazy ideas on how to run a utopia and do evil things to his weird creations. One of the things that's interesting about this is so many of these films that take place after Endgame feel like end up, a lot of the franchise, particularly Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, I think ended up feeling like another entry in franchise Marvel and less another entry in Doctor Strange or Ant-Man. And sometimes that works better than others, like Doctor Strange worked a lot better than Ant-Man. I think we can all, regardless of how you feel about those films, I think we can all agree on that. This felt like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, despite all that going on. It felt honestly like a comic. In some ways, I find this film interesting, and with James Gunn, and you know, he's taking on DC and all these other comic books, and I was just talking about Super and thinking about how most of his filmography is superhero movies or comic book movies. And in this, it feels like somebody who reads comics. Like, this feels like an issue that happened after a major crossover where the creative team is back and they have to deal with what, you know, the studio made happen or the publisher made happen in the Secret Wars or Infinity Gauntlet or something, and they have to pick up the pieces and deal with it. And this felt like that through and through, which I actually thought was really cool. Anything to do with continuity he dealt with in a very like kind of comicsy way. I do feel like that's getting lost in the shuffle of reviewing these Marvel films, as we don't often talk about how they're the source material they're adapted from. We're just comparing them to other movies, and I think that's a little disingenuous in some cases, but I do think in this, like, you do feel I can tell James Gunn read comics from this. The big question, I guess, from this is Adam Warlock is another Marvel character who's just, you know, they have to have a new character in each of these movies. Like, if there's a sequel, they're like, we have to throw somebody out. And Adam Warlock's a major character. He obviously wasn't in Endgame or Infinity War. He is a major character with Thanos and all that normally in the comics, but they decided not to do that. And I was a little confused about him. I did talk to my dad about Adam Warlock, and he told me this is more like the original iteration of Adam Warlock before he like goes in the cocoon and becomes Adam Warlock most of us know later. I didn't know that. I did grow up, like, my dad was a big fan of Adam Warlock, but I read like the Infinity Watch, like I read a lot about that character, and I was excited to see him. I don't think it meshed well with the rest of the characters, because most of what I remember this is the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Adam Warlock part just felt like, I mean, he was part of major plot points in this, but it felt like he'd swoop in, like James Gunn forgot he was there and looked up at his bulletin board and goes, all right, Adam Warlock, yeah, I gotta have him. He's the inciting incident for Rocket. He does this big thing later on. He does this, he does that. It just feels like he swoops in. Like, I'd forget he was in this movie, and then I'm like, all right, this guy. Maybe they're going to do other things with him later, but he felt very shoehorned into this whole thing. I really didn't like how they used him, and I didn't particularly like the portrayal, to be honest. I think Will Poulter is a good actor. He could probably do something more interesting down the line, but that character didn't really work for me in this. I'm glad that, like, you know, my dad liked him, so I'm happy about that because I know he's a big fan. I'm sort of fine with it. I'm not like angry. I just wish they'd done a better job and that he wasn't so like ham-fisted into this. But that's sort of the thing with this movie, is it's a messy screenplay. But in other ways, like, James Gunn sort of knows it. Like, the Gamora thing's interesting because it just like she just shows up at a certain point and they're like, well, she's with the team because, you know, of course. And it just, that felt very tacked on, but then they sort of deal with her, and it feels like the script was like, well, she's here, so even though we had to just like throw her in here for various reasons, we're still going to deal with her in an appropriate way and like have that part well written. It's just how we got to there doesn't work as well. There's certain other parts where it's just like they kind of go into something, but then there's like some emotional stakes to it where it's like its abruptness sort of works. So despite this being sort of messier and having so many threads and stuff, it sort of works for itself. I do think, like, James Gunn, some of it, like the music choices didn't feel as interesting. I haven't liked the soundtracks for 2 or 3 as much. Like 1 I really liked and played for and I feel like everybody liked the soundtrack for 1. But in this, it's like the No Sleep Till Brooklyn thing, which everyone's bringing up because that was also in Mario. In Mario, they were in Brooklyn, I believe. Although I would criticize the Mario one more for like, why didn't they do Biggie? He was like the greatest rapper at rapping the word Nintendo of all time. Look it up. Just listen to it. It's in Get Money, and I believe it's in Juicy. So both of those. In this, they do it, but it's also like first album Beastie Boys. Come on, guys. You don't want J.J. Abrams to have better Beastie Boy taste in his space movie than you. You know, it's like also Intergalactic. Inner fucking Galactic is an amazing song. First album Beastie Boys is like fine. It's not really my thing. I like all the other albums. It's like, so what you want? There's so many cool ones, and they have this great action sequence, and it does actually work better than the Mario movie. But I still like, I would have gone with Intergalactic. That would have been cool. Or Body Movin', or I don't know. There's a lot of done. Sure Shot. They're shooting guns. Come on, James Gunn. I feel like he could have tried harder. But I think, like, what are these movies essentially like really talking about is the core of a found family and what's important and why the characters need them. And I think that is what this film does well. It understands the core and the themes of these characters. It did feel like in Doctor Strange and Ant-Man, they lost what those franchises were about, and it feels like James Gunn's auteur personality, you can't do the Guardians without him, basically. It's like it really wouldn't work as well. And even though I do think they sort of worked in Infinity War and Endgame and stuff, I do think it'd be like, this feels very James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, full stop, 100%. This is who this is. And I love that about these movies. Like, it made me happy about this franchise when I wasn't the biggest fan of 2, things like that. But it showed he likes this shit, basically, and he's good at doing it. I liked how tactile and how like it felt like I could actually touch the special effects on the planets. Like it didn't feel like a green screen all the time. It felt like actual sets that had texture to them and stuff. That was awesome. I liked all the colors and the sets for once. It, you know, if there was a crazy CG character like a weird pig with machine gun arms and stuff, at least that's like a cool weird thing and not like a cool dumb thing where I'm just like, oh, I don't even care. The CG uncanny valley-ness has sort of blinded me to the whole thing. It felt like imaginative and interesting, everything that's going on with special effects, which like in all honesty we don't see enough of. I think the chemistry between all of them is great. This is definitely probably Chris Pratt's best movie role. I actually like him when I watch him as Star-Lord. When I watch him as anything else, I don't. But as well as like, I think Bradley Cooper does a great Rocket. I think Karen Gillan's very great. I think there's a reason Dave Bautista became a movie star after this. So many people were very good, but I'm very happy with what I watch. I don't think this is one of the greatest Marvel movies ever. Maybe of the recent ilk, sure, I would put it up there with like No Way Home and stuff like that. It is a little scarier for kids. I don't think the extremes everyone's going to, which I know is like a thing for the internet and for movie reviews, we have to go to extremes. But I don't think it's that bad, but my kids aren't really, they'd have to watch Guardians 1 first. So we're not, I know in there, I think that's a little too much for them right now. So I wouldn't take super little kids to the first one. So I'm a little confused if people were upset, but that's, you know, your own parental choice because it's a hot button issue, I guess. But like a scary film that makes you not want to test on animals, to be honest, if you're going to freak your kids out about that, is that such a bad thing? I don't think so. So, you know, if you're going to scare your kids, at least have a message behind it. Just don't do it randomly. If you do it randomly, you're just a jerk. But if there's a message, you're a jerk, but they learned something. So that's the difference. I think this showed me what I used to, and I talked about in my Auteur theory video, I think, and I've talked about in other places, is like how the Marvel machine used to work is you could tell the unique voice through the thing and it wouldn't feel too Marvel-y. You can get traces of that and it feels like almost classic Hollywood where you're like, oh, the studio director didn't care as much this week. It feels sadder when it's like their first movie in 4 years or something. But in this, it felt very much like this is James Gunn through and through, and his characters and his love for them and the love. Like it felt like, I don't know, maybe these people fucking hate each other. I don't actually know, but on the screen you feel like they do. The big lie of cinema and editing is present in this and it works completely, and that I really loved about this. I think it's a really fine Marvel movie. It makes you actually sit there and go, oh, this is why I like these. I think it's probably the one that was best at it since No Way Home. You know, Wakanda Forever had a lot to deal with, but it did deal with it well. But I think this shows you, much like No Way Home, the morals of Marvel, but also the fun of it as well. And I had a lot of fun. There were a lot of great sequences, like that shootout fight sequence in the hallway was great, despite the basic music choice. You know, it's stuff like that. But I'm happy where this franchise ended up. I'm happy where it ended, and it's nice seeing a fun space Ravager kind of movie from James Gunn like this from Marvel, and seeing the Guardians kind of reminds you of a past of being surprised by them and why you were surprised by them in the first place. I don't know if this surprised me because we shot through Quantumania and we're all kind of like burned out a bit, and it surprised you that it's like good, but it reminded you why you were surprised a tree could talk with a talking raccoon. In this, you're reminded why you love that raccoon and why they love that raccoon and why they were together and why they like each other despite being a mismatched group of weird ass felons and everything like that. That's when Guardians works best, and I think James Gunn came back to kind of remind you why you like this whole thing in the first place, and maybe remind himself on his way out. I was happy to see him here, but it's also nice to see him go and move on to other things. And I'm glad to have seen this franchise. It's nice to see a franchise go out where you're like goodbye, I'll miss you. But I think we're all done and we had our time together. And I think the healthy attitude of some of these is when you have that found family and they know their time is over and they need to split up for all of them. And I think in this, it's like James Gunn knew he's had his time and he needs to move on. And I think we all do, but it was nice while it lasted, and this movie was nice while it was going on. So if you have seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.